What's up, everybody? Welcome to the final MLS Power Rankings show of 2021. It's after week 34, headed into Decision Day, which is, of course, Sunday. We have a second screen watch-along, a live show, all 5 hours of all the soccer starting at, I think it is 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. We'll be with you through the Eastern Conference, through the Western Conference. We've got a ton of special guests that will join us. Live standings on screen, goal alerts. We're going to split up the games among all of us. It's going to be myself, Matt Doyle, David Goss, and Kalen Carr. And we're just gonna watch, man. I assume all you out there have your team, and that's what you care about. You want to be engaged with your game. It's going to decide your seeding, whether or not you get in. As of the taping right now, I believe it is 12 teams competing for 7 playoff spots through this final week of the season here. So we're your second screen. Come hang out with us. We'll tell you when goals get scored. We'll tell you when the standings change. We'll tell you what it means for your team and what it means for the entire league. So it should be really fun. And this has been really fun, Doyle, the power rankings for the entire season. We started something new on Twitter Spaces. Of course, you could have listened live all throughout the year on Tuesdays at 11 p.m. 11 p.m. Ooh, a little too late for me. 11 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays on my Twitter handle. You can see it on screen there on the YouTube, or you watched it on YouTube, which was cool as well. Let's get started. Number 10 in these final power rankings for us are the Portland Timbers. They are holding strong in that position, it seems, Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
Where do the Timbers stand going into this final week of the regular season in your mind?
They stand in a good spot, but it's not done yet. There's still, like, if things go disastrously wrong this weekend or this midweek and then weekend, they could still miss the playoffs. And that's kind of wild to me, given how talented the Timbers are. Now, granted, they've dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the year, but like most teams have. So it's one of those things where it's almost like Orlando City, where everyone knows this team, if they get right and get rolling, could do real damage in the playoffs. But they haven't really got, like, even when they had that good 8-game stretch, they weren't playing the best soccer in the world. You know, they were still super vulnerable at the back. They were, I think, more dangerous going forward and have a lot of solutions in the attack. But like they don't feel complete yet, Weeby. Like we're entering the last week of the season, and they don't feel like they know what their best lineup is, and that's a concern.
So last 2 games of the season for the Portland Timbers, 49 points, currently in a home game in the Western Conference. Somehow, some way, they've got away Real Salt Lake Wednesday. That's a big one. And then they finish the season at home against Austin. That's a scheduling gift for the Timbers. Chris, I invited you in here, man. So unmute yourself real quick and give your Decision Day week viewpoint on this Portland Timbers team.
Decision Day week viewpoint is that in terms of considering how the Timbers are looking going into the playoffs, whether they're going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs, the one to watch really is that Wednesday game at RSL. It's a really, really good test piece for how the Timbers are going to be able to handle playoff-type game states, because RSL is the team, especially at home. Frankly, they kind of do it everywhere, but especially at home, they're just going to pin their ears back, and they're going to come at you. They're going to open themselves up, but they're really going to they're going to come out. They're going to push numbers on, and how teams handle that is going to be, and how the Timbers handle that is going to be indicative of how they're able to handle similar kinds of game states in the playoffs. And look, if you want to win playoff games, you're going to have to handle those game states. And so how the Timbers handle that game on Wednesday, I think will tell you a lot about whether this is, a team that may be a one and done kind of team, or a team that could get in as a bit of a dark horse.
Chris, I would argue that a team that pins the ears back and kind of opens the game up it actually plays into the Timbers' hands a little bit. Like, the Timbers are better in those situations where they can sort of absorb and then hit in transition, rather than be the team that has to be the protagonist. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and I think it's why the Timbers beat RSL 6-2 last month, and put a touchdown up on them. I think the Timbers can be very successful in those types of situations, but we've also seen them struggle to control games when they get their noses in front. And so that's exactly what they're going to need to do in this game at RSL, where RSL is going to be desperate. They need the result even more than the Timbers do. And how the Timbers handle that kind of desperation from a team that plays the way RSL does, I think tells you will tell you a lot about what to expect from the Timbers come late November, if anything at all, assuming they get in.
Okay, last question for you, Chris, because we got to keep it moving on this show. But I have to ask you, how did you experience the Dairon goal?
I was in the stands, and honestly, it was phenomenal. It was amazing. You can throw every superlative out there, and they all apply. But Dairon Asprilla does that. I don't think anybody was surprised. That may be the one that you can't. Because Asprilla does that. He's tried it multiple times in the past. He hit one in USL last year. And so nobody's surprised. But look, from the outside, he really seems to be sort of a great guy. And it's lovely to see sort of these kinds of things happen for Dairon Asprilla. It's good things happening to somebody who, from a public perspective, looks to be a good person. So
I completely agree. We'll see now if regular season Dairon also applies to the postseason Dairon we knew from years past. Timbers at 10, no move from them. Chris, thank you so much all throughout the year, giving us great information on the Timbers. Appreciate you, man.
You got it, guys. Thank you.
All right, on to number 9 we go. And that's the Vancouver Whitecaps. Big risers. Vinny Sartini. Andiamo! +4 up to 9. Doyle, we should have Peter Galindo joining us here in a second. We hope to give us a little insight on what's going on in Vancouver. But this is absolute magic. And we're going to see highlights from week 33. And that's because Vancouver played tonight, Tuesday night. Big game, huge game, massive game at LAFC, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, MLS Live on ESPN+. This is just an enormous game. LAFC is basically on the line. And for Vancouver, if they can draw both games that they have left, they're like 98% probability to be in. So every result matters now. If they win, they're basically in.
Yeah.
Doyle, what have you made of this run? I mean, Mark Dos Santos, he prepared him for it, right?
That's what Mark says.
But he kind of did. They had a lot of results. Vanny Sartini even said it.
Yeah, I mean, they got they had a long unbeaten streak. They weren't winning games, but they weren't losing games, which is good. But the big thing that's changed, and if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing the highlights now. Vancouver's playing the ball forward. They did not move the ball forward quickly out of midfield, especially at all under Mark Dos Santos for 2.5 years. And, Vanny Sartini has changed that. And you're seeing it with, Russell Tybert, he getting this assist to Brian White, like that is a pass that just did not exist under Mark Dos Santos. And so there have been some personnel changes over the course of the year. There's been a formation change. They're playing a 3-4-2-1 with Ryan Gauld sort of in the half spaces, and he's been best 11 caliber since he came around. And Brian White has obviously been one of the stories of the season. But to me, it's just the principles of play. Like the first pass you look for is the forward pass. You check your shoulder and you make sure that you know what runs are available. You know where the defense is, so that before you can even get the ball, before you even receive the ball, you know what ball you're playing. And that is a huge difference compared to what they were like under Mark Dos Santos. And it's made them one of the best teams in the league to watch. It's made them explosive in attack, and it's got them above the playoff line. Now, if they lose tonight, they go back below the playoff line. So they are still playing for their lives, but it's been fun. And I wrote a column to this effect a couple of weeks ago. This is the most fun I've ever had watching the Whitecaps. In the entire decade they have been in MLS, other than like the Pedro Martinez or Pedro Morales half season, they have been a brutal team to watch, and they are no longer that under Vanny Sartini.
All right, Peter Galindo is with us from Sportsnet. Peter, you got a better feel than we do about what's going on with the Whitecaps. What's your feel as to how this season will end, how Vanny Sartini and the boys will finish down the stretch, and what it means for the future of the club? Because he seems to be making a pretty good case that he should at least be in strong consideration for the full-time job as manager.
Yeah, at this point, you have to say he does. And honestly, guys, I am done making predictions with this Whitecaps team since Vanny Sartini came in, because every time I feel like, oh, yeah, they're going to hit a wall. This run of games coming up is going to be too hard for them to overcome. They overcome it. I mean, that comeback win against Portland was probably the moment when I'm like, okay, they're probably going to do this. But if they actually turn it around, beat LAFC, a team that they traditionally, at least since LAFC has been in the league, have done quite poorly against, and then obviously get into the playoffs from there, it could actually have a real lasting effect, at least playing wise on the club, because, I think Matt mentioned it there. Like, this is probably the most entertaining soccer they have played since they entered the league. Maybe apart from that 2015 side when they were pushing for the Shield at certain points. So if they can get into the playoffs, play a style that's easy on the eye, and have a clear motivator in Vanni Sartini on the touchline, then I think he absolutely has the job. And at that point, if you can get him maybe one or two more center backs to really shore up that back line, I honestly think that they could be a more than solid enough team in the West next year.
Peter, what? Go ahead,
Weeby.
No, you go ahead. All right. So one of the things you mentioned, getting one or two more center backs. One of the things Vanni Sartini has done that's been kind of remarkable is, like, everybody's a center back. Pat Metcalf will try him at center back. And Jake Nerwinski, playing him as a left. Jake Nerwinski came into the league and spent first 4 years as a right back. And now he's playing as a left center back. He has license to get on the ball and push forward on the ball. In the, as a left center back in the 3-4-2-1, he is seeing things in players that I'm not sure anybody else saw, and it's working.
100%. Yeah. And even turning Russell Tybert back into that kind of box-to-box menace that he used to be. Like, people forget, those who watch the national team and those who watch the Whitecaps, up until the end of probably the 2018 season, Russell Tybert was a regular for Canada and was actually doing quite well in a box-to-box role. And then that all changed under Marc Dos Santos. So that alone has kind of shown just the amazing transformation Vanni Sartini's had on some of these players. And I mean, kudos to him for being able to find the right system, put these players into the system that make it work very, very well. And look, is it perfect? No, because they're still defensively quite suspect, but I think that's to be expected when a coach comes in on an interim basis towards the end of the season with a real mishmash of players in different areas.
So last one for you here, Peter. And I was looking at some numbers the other day, and it was surprising to me that I think it was in like the last couple windows in CONCACAF, the Vancouver Whitecaps are among or the biggest spender, which was a mind blower to me. And I think FIFA put those numbers together. So take that for what you will. Where is this club going, in your opinion, with Axel Schuster involved? It's sort of starting to be more of a national story when it kind of hasn't been because of lack of success for a while here.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, people would hear those numbers and say, "Yeah, that's surprising. I never would have thought they would." But people always criticize the Whitecaps ownership for not spending, but certainly when you look at wages, they don't spend. But like, they have spent money to bring in some decent players here. I mean, they obviously bring in Ryan Gauld, who has obviously been a focal point of the turnaround. You can't discredit that. But they've also made, and obviously Lucas Cavallini was a major signing too. But you look at guys like Christian Dajome comes in. He was a free transfer. On a pretty reasonable salary, and he's made a massive impact. He's probably been one of Vancouver's best players this year. David Caicedo, another one who was kind of a bit of an under the radar type move. He's come in and done very well. Like, all these guys, like, I really think ever since Nikos Overhool came in on the recruitment side, and they've started to lean more heavily into analytics and whatnot, I think that's made a bit of a difference, because you're even now seeing, look at Brian White, right? I mean, he was a guy who wasn't supposed to be doing very much, if at all. He was just supposed to be backing up Cavallini while he was hurt, and now he's the go-to starter up front.
There we have it. It's all working in Vancouver. 9 in these power rankings, up 4 spots. Have a huge game tonight. Again, MLS Live on ESPN Plus at LAFC. So if you're listening live, trying to plan your Tuesday, or you're watching on YouTube later on today, and you're like, I got nothing to do tonight. What do I want to do? LAFC Vancouver. That's your spot. Peter, we thank you for your time, man.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Let's keep it going. On to number 8 we go. Jeff Reuter is with us to talk Minnesota United and this magic man who you're seeing on YouTube, Emmanuel Reynoso. Jeff, what's up? You're one of the originals here on these Twitter Spaces. From the very start, you've been with us.
Yeah, and it honestly feels like I've been waiting in the lobby ever since the first episode started.
The preseason ones were more kind than those first couple of weeks to Minnesota United. Where have we ended up, though? Huge win against Sporting Kansas City.
huge win, needed win. And I think it's just kind of a reminder, like, so when you texted me last night, Weeby, to see if I would be on this, I know that my response was, I'm surprised that they're in the top 10. But I think the more that I really think about it, like, this roster wasn't made for a supporter shield challenge across a 34-game season. This is a roster. This is a identity. This is a core that really is built for the playoffs. And so I think for the third straight year, it does feel like Adrian Heath and his team are flipping the switch, so to speak, and getting into that knockout mentality, that cup mentality, which makes sense for someone who obviously in his playing career had great success in an FA Cup. You look at the veteran status, you look at the fact that he's one of the few coaches who wants the ball, wants to control the game, doesn't want to be left at the mercy of turnovers and counterattacks. You throw in, like you said, a top 3 playmaker in MLS. Franco Fragapane, I think, has fully come online, looks better than Kevin Molino did on that left side. And I think that he and Reynoso are that true 1-2 punch that you need to be able to make waves in the playoffs. Look, I think that there are still some clear favorites, New England, Seattle, given what they've done in the Western Conference playoffs over the last half decade. But there are very few other teams that I would say are clearly in a better spot to make a challenge for conference finals, we'll say at least, than Minnesota United as currently constructed.
So what has changed? Is it just a matter of getting Reynoso healthy, Ozzy Alonso healthy, Ludd and Fragapane, and finally Adrian Uno?
I think that's a big part of it. I mean, like, Unu is just, if you get anything out of him in this last this last push in the playoffs and the last week, because they still haven't clinched, right? If you get anything out of him, great. I think at this point, we'll see how he makes good on being the highest paid player by 2 or 3 times on this roster next season. But you look at Fragapane, you look at Robin Lod, who's come up big with goals in past seasons and this season. I think people forget it because in 2019, he was struggling to adjust. He was the one who scored in the Open Cup final. So he does also bring that sort of big game mentality, which really doesn't mean anything, but it does, right? Like you see it, you recognize it when you see it. But I think, the health of Reynoso is a big one. He's obviously being targeted, or it has been for the second half of the season tremendously. I think this is the second game against Sporting Kansas City at home where I remember just like a clear kind of like ankle breaking, like you would see it in like the 80s sports movie right before the championship game, right? Where there's like the wrestler's heel who comes in, breaks the Achilles, and then, the next man up has to step in and save the day. Probably played by one of the Savage brothers. I think that, they have some of that energy to them. They have some of that, we're going after the one guy, but the collective has to step up. Ozzy Alonso with that renaissance to keep his playoff streak alive. It's intangibles, which isn't an answer you and I like, Doyle.
Nope.
It isn't here's the style of play that changed. Here's the player who stepped up, who wasn't getting minutes or who wasn't getting played in the right role. It's towards the end of the season, and I think it's a veteran locker room that doesn't want the title window to be closed just yet. And I think they're getting the most out of what they've got right now.
Jeff, let me ask you this. Like, it looks like Minnesota will get into the playoffs, and like at this point of the year, sometimes it looks like it can be deceiving, right? What if they don't, or if they crash out early, or if they fail to meet their own expectations, what will it be that does them in? What's an Achilles heel, so to speak?
I think the Achilles heel there would be, I think that they're going to say injuries, but every team's dealt with injuries in the world. That isn't even just an MLS problem. That's just the realities of scheduling from here to the other side of the Qatar World Cup. I think it's tremendous patience to try to flip that switch, to go back to one of the first answers. I think not feeling a need to bring in a starting striker or starting left winger at the start of the season to give them a full preseason and training camp. This has happened in the past a couple other years. I know we talked about it, I think, midway through the season, but they waited a tremendous amount of time, and the results punished them. They lost their first 4 games. If they had even picked up 6 points in that, we're not talking about them as they look like they're making the playoffs. They would be in the playoffs. They would be probably contending and clearly in the top 4 at this point if they had just done what was expected of them and if they'd had those players available. So part of that is a recruitment issue. Part of that is knowing that they had their targets and being a little too patient with those negotiations at the risk of losing points, which they ultimately dropped. I think that it's impossible to overstate how troubling that first 4 games was and how much more difficult it made the rest of the season, which then, of course, credit to be in the position that they are now with, 49 points over the last 29 games, but leaving it just a little bit late. And then you factor in some of the summer moves that they had to make, Jan Gregus being played longer than apparently necessary, given how he's been frozen out of the team recently. Again, I think that this is a team that is built for a knockout tournament like the MLS Cup playoffs, sponsored by whoever sponsors it these days. But, overall, yeah, I got you. Overall, though, I think that they just left it a little late at the start. There is a serious, I mean, it's happened with Reynoso. It happened with Benedetti in the past when they were going after him. Darwin Quintero took a few extra weeks. That has cost them results in the past. And if they miss the playoffs, it will be the reason that they are looking on the outside.
In LA on decision day, our Minnesota United, they're above the playoff line right now. They'll stay there until decision day. Will they stay there after? We'll find out. Jeff Ruder over at The Athletic, one of the originals here on these Twitter Spaces. Jeff, we appreciate you, man.
Yeah, anytime, guys.
All right, on to number 7 we go. NYCFC, Doyle. We were talking about the Timbers, which, by the way, got a bad doc on this one. The Red Bulls were number 10. The Red Bulls fans are going to say, "Oh my God, we got underappreciated."
Wait. So this is the Sam Jones froze the Red Bulls out of the top 10?
There was a mistake made between the aggregate list that I get and the written article that Sam put in. And you know what? We gave the Portland Timbers just a little too much due. Let's go to the blue side of New York just to honor the red side, I guess. Up 5 spots, New York City. Like you're talking about, man, I think the Portland Timbers or Orlando City, like if they just find their form, like they could be really dangerous. They could. Like, this is exactly what New York City is doing right now.
Yeah,
finding form, and it's good that they're doing it against bad teams to warm up for more difficult tests.
Yes, and the more difficult test will come on Sunday when they host Philadelphia, who is, for my money, Philly's the second or third best team in the Eastern Conference, and so is NYCFC. And I know they had that terrible run, through most of October, the 1 win in 10 games, 6 straight without a win, couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. And as you said, they have turned it around over the past week, 3 games, 3 wins, 10 goals. But that came against bad teams. I still think NYCFC, I still think what we saw in late summer from them is a blip. I think the real version of NYCFC is the group that we saw up until September and that we've seen over the past week. They're so good with the ball. They're so good at controlling the game and creating chances. They have in Maxi Morales, one of the great underrated playmakers in league history. And in Tati Castellanos, look, he's not the most clinical finisher, but he still leads the Golden Boot race, and he's.
But that tells you, if you go look at the underlying stats, nobody has more opportunities to score goals than Tati, and nobody. It's not even that close. Like they create, and he creates, and his movement creates so much danger.
Yeah, and that is the focal point for NYCFC. Like he creates how they attack, and they work within that framework. The Achilles heel for this team is that, at the start of the year, Jesus Medina was putting the ball in the back of the net. I don't think he scored in months, or he might have gotten one. He had one
recently,
DC.
Yeah, he got recently, but it has tapered off.
It has tapered off, and like the new South American guys, Santi Rodriguez and Tyus Magno and Thiago Andrade, they're all talented, but none of them have been productive. These are issues that they have to solve if they're going to make the type of run that the eye test and the underlying numbers say that they are capable
of. So look, we should probably give the red side of New York a little bit of time here, given that we sort of biffed the rankings here.
Wait a minute. We can.
You don't want to do it?
No, we could blame this on Sam Jones. We didn't biff this. This is an Atlanta fan conspiracy to deny the Red Bulls their due.
I enjoy that. Anyway,
Okay.
look. Right now, New York City, 50 points, 4th in the East. They're in a home game, and that is basically it's equivalency of what you would think is a very likely Eastern Conference semifinal match, right? Like Philly, NYC on the final day. So we've got a great preview for you on decision day on that one. Again, I remind you of the second stream because that is not going to be in the Eastern Conference, the game on ESPN. That would be Nashville New York Red Bulls. But 2 spots, 3 spots, 4 points down, my math is rough here, are the Red Bulls right above the line. So both sides of New York going from a place where we thought they might both miss the playoffs just a couple weeks ago to now both potentially being in, and the Red Bulls big risers, and I assume so would New York City at +5. So that's number 7 for us. Happy all around for Ronnie Dyla. They are pulling out of their swoon. Let's keep it going to number 6 and get to the Philadelphia Union, their opponents on decision day. Marissa Pilla is with us. Marissa, I sent you an invite to speak, so see if you can get in. If you can't, just send me an invite. Rich, go ahead and roll those highlights on YouTube. Oh, yeah. Sunday night. FC Cincinnati. What a palate cleanser, baby. Give me some Paxton Aronson. Give me some Philly youngsters. Perfect timing for that game for Jim Curtin.
It was. In Philadelphia, they have played really well, I think, in the month or so since they lost to Club America in the CCL semifinals. And Curtin said it after that game. If we play like this in MLS play, we'll do really well. And they have done really well. And it's come with the kids on the field in a lot of times, and it has come with the veterans on the field. And now they're going into decision day with a pretty well-rested team and a great test. Like, Philly are guaranteed to have a top 4 seed. It could go as high as number 2, or it could drop as low as number 4, depending on how they do at Yankee Stadium against NYCFC this weekend. And playing NYCFC at Yankee Stadium has been brutal this year. Like, they have been, they've been pretty good at Red Bull Arena when they play their home games at home in the Bronx. They are one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league that I've seen. And so it's a playoff caliber test for this Union team. And if you look at what they've done under Jim Curtin, improving year over year, putting homegrown players into the best 11 and selling them literally to Champions League teams, changing formations and principles of play. Remember, 3 years ago, they were a 4-2-3-1 team that played like heavy ball possession and got the wingers involved. Now they're primarily a 4-4-2 team. Like, the next step for this group is to make a real postseason run. And this weekend feels like the start of the postseason for Philadelphia. So I'm curious to see how they come out and answer the bell. I'm curious to see if Jim Curtin sticks with the 4-3-2-1 Christmas tree that he's been playing, the old AC Milan style Christmas tree formation, which we have not seen a lot of in MLS ever.
Seems like
it's worked really well for this team.
Yeah. We're waiting to get Marissa on here. We're having some trouble with the Twitter Spaces interface, which happens from time to time. While we wait, Doyle, because I do want to talk to her about sort of that progression that you mentioned. Because what the Union have done is, I think, what a lot of teams in MLS would like to do, which is to sort of set a North Star as to what they are as a club, to not deviate greatly, to invest. And you could argue that they could invest more. But right now they're second in the East, and they're selling best 11 players, and the young guys keep rolling in. That progression is incredible, and the sustainability and the consistency. But tell me who you liked more in that game, Jack McGlynn or Paxton Aronson?
I mean, it's 2 high-level 18-year-old prospects. I mean, they're not even prospects anymore. They're playing real minutes for an MLS Cup contender. So, they are officially contributing high-level players. Aronson is he's a killer in the 18. We saw it on that goal. His decisions are a lot quicker and a lot more ruthless than his brothers were when his brother was the same age. Now, I don't know if Paxton is going to end up being better than Brendan overall, but he's better now than Brendan was. That said, Jack McGlynn's vision is special. His not to say that Paxton Aronson's isn't, but like Brendan Aronson with that left foot of his, he controls the game and he sees alleys that there aren't a lot of American players ever have seen those types of passes. And I always love players like that. So that's always what I'm drawn to, even though there are real concerns about his ability to defend and be athletic enough at the highest levels.
By the way, we had a good conversation about this on Extra Time Monday. So if you don't download or subscribe or listen, please Go do that. We got Marissa in. Unmute yourself, Marissa. All right. What's up?
Yes,
Hey,
finally.
believe me, this is not the first time that I've played help desk on the back end during a Twitter Spaces. Everybody's on board though. So tell me about this season from a Union perspective. We sort of like gave the quick sell. You sell best 11 players after a Shield year, and for most teams, you would think that probably would mean a big drop. But here the Union are in second. What do you make of it all?
Yeah, I think it's really commendable. As you said, this is a team that really went above and beyond last year, when last season, I think for everyone, was trying in 1,000 different ways. And they ended up with the Supporters Shield, and such a huge accomplishment, but then they lost in the playoffs. And it was just kind of like the air got let out. And then further along in the off season, you lose huge players like Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie. And then it's like, okay, now what? What do we do? We're in Champions League, CONCACAF Champions League, and they want to try to win. And I think it's so commendable that they made it as far as they did into the semifinals in Champions League, and still are able to finish now at maybe possibly the second spot in the East. It's not easy to do, as we've seen in years past, where teams put everything into Champions League and then don't even make the playoffs. So I think Jim Curtin and Ernst Tanner deserve a lot of credit for finding unique players in unique ways, and making them work. And as you guys were talking about the Christmas tree formation, as I was struggling behind the scenes, I totally agree. I feel like it's something we can be seeing later on, and it gives them an opportunity to put more numbers up in the midfield and just have those two-way players a little bit more and get more talent on the field. So I think it's been an interesting year to watch from afar for the Union. And Philly fans, we're always cautiously pessimistic. We never get too high on ourselves. We always like to live in the lows. But I think we're in a good spot right now. I think it's a good time to kind of put your faith a little bit more in that team.
Give me two scenarios. One scenario, the Union make a deep run in the playoffs. Another scenario, they crash out. Why is it possible that they could do both?
Oh gosh. Okay. So they're going to make a run because they have so many different scorers. They have 11 different goal scorers with 2 or more goals. So even when Shabilko had that little bit of a drought he had over the late summer, early fall, other people were stepping up. But on the converse side, playoffs are one and done. This team at points in the season has been spotty. Yes, right now they're on a run. They have only lost 1 game in the last 10 days, but we know playoffs are a completely different beast. You need to show up in that moment. So I think either their variety in goal scorers is going to help carry them through. Their veteran leadership from guys like Ale Bedoya is going to help. Or on the other side, they're going to start hitting those weird pockets of inconsistency. And we saw what happened last year when they had a first round bye into playoffs. That didn't really go well for them. That didn't really work out the way that they saw it playing out in their mind. So that's kind of how I see it going. Obviously, I hope they win.
TBD right now would be Philly, New York Red Bulls in the first round in the playoffs. We know decision day, and this week we'll shake all that up. Marissa Pillow, we thank you for soldiering on through to get on here with us, Marissa.
Thank you, guys. Again, appreciate the patience. I've never done this.
No problem. No problem at all. All right, let's keep it going here on these power rankings from 6 to 5. Nashville SC, not moving at all. Jamie Watson, it's fitting. Nashville with a draw in these power rankings.
Yeah, I mean, just finding a way to get a result on the road. I'm sure we won't talk about that at all. Nothing really happened exciting at the end of the game at all.
Nothing. But you know what? I look at that. Obviously, I have my take on it. And I think it should have been a goal. But that just tells you what the universe is going for this year. And that is draw at any cost for Nashville SC.
Well, I think if you win at home and you tie on the road, everybody sort of subscribes to that adage. So in that game, the pressure was on Orlando to get a full 3 points. And in the first half, if you watch the game, they look every bit of the part like they were going to get all 3 points. But again, this has probably been the problem with Orlando, and I'm sure a lot of their fans will say that they don't put teams away, right, when they have the opportunity. And they were dominant in the first half, but it goes in 1-0. And then at half, Nashville makes some adjustments. They were far better in the second half. They get their goal through Mukhtar. And it's 1-1. The game's pushing on. And then obviously the craziness at the end, it goes Nashville's way. And they're able to walk away with a point. And Orlando will feel certainly disappointed to only get 1 point from that match. But Nashville did what they needed to get the result.
So I've learned not to relitigate referee decisions once my final judgment on instant replays come down. So we won't. What I will ask you to do, though, is to tell me what you've seen up close and personal from Hani Mukhtar this year. And of course, the Twitter mentions are full of Nashville fans saying Hani for MVP. And he has a very good case. I don't think he'll win, but he has an amazing case. What has made him special, different, so effective this year in your mind?
I think Hani Mukhtar has 15 goals, 12 assists, so 27 combined goals and assists on the season, which equates for exactly half of the goals that Nashville has scored, 54, which, by the way, that they're third best in goals scored this season. New England's got 65, New York's got 55, and then Kansas City 57. Right, so they're fourth best. Only 3 teams have more goals than them. It's been a complete turnaround, right? Because that was always the knock, wasn't it? It was, well, Nashville doesn't concede, and they had the best record defensively for an expansion team last season, but they weren't scoring goals. Well, now they go and they have the 4th highest goal tally on the season. And then you look at goal differential, right? They sit at a plus 22 currently, which I believe is either second best in Major League Soccer, maybe third best. And it's because Hani's taken this next step. He's made players better around him. CJ Sapong was deemed surplus by the Chicago Fire. And then now he's got 12 goals on the season as well. He's making players around him. Randall Leal as well has come on lately. And when Hani Mukhtar's not on the field, like in Philadelphia, they struggled to create anything of substance going forward. And Marissa could tell you that because everybody in that stadium at Subaru Park against Philadelphia just never really felt completely threatened by Nashville. And that's the Mukhtar effect, I feel like. So he's certainly the most important and influential player in the attacking phase for Nashville. And I can see why it's Carlos Heel and Hani Mukhtar, because both of those players are certainly special. And what they mean to their team and the difference without them is stark, the contrast.
Sorry, I had myself muted. There was an ambulance going by.
I was surprised.
Let me talk about the schedule a little bit, because one of the things that we talked about a lot at the start of the year was how front-loaded Nashville's schedule was with home games, and that's meant a lot of away dates on the back half here. The team has handled it, as you said. Win at home, draw on the road, and nobody's going to mind too much. That said, there's only been one win since since mid-September, one win in the last 9. Not playing great soccer. Is there something? But Nashville ends the season with a home game against the Red Bulls, who are one of the hottest teams in the league right now. Is there something that you need to see from the group in this game, or is it okay, win, lose, or draw? It's just job done. We're into the playoffs. We're going to start with a home game no matter what, and a confidence that the team can get back to playing the type of soccer they played at the start of the season?
I think that's a very fair question, but I also think there's a sort of farce in the mix of that one win in the last 9. There was a stretch in there where they went on the road to Miami. They got a win there on the road. Then they go to Chicago. They shut out Chicago on the road. They go to NYCFC, admittedly at Red Bull Arena. They get a shutout there. They go away to DC. They get a shutout there. They get the draw then at Columbus. Then they go to Philly. The only difference was the penalty, really, in that match, and Philadelphia puts them away. But you're looking at, of course, across that little stretch in there, they had 314 minutes of scoreless soccer on the road where they didn't concede. So while they weren't winning the game, they also were going on the road and they were not losing.
They were not playing good soccer. I'm talking about playing the type of soccer that this team played in the first half of the year.
Yeah, I think the big thing is when they go on the road, and where they're not good on the road is they're not as expansive going forward, right? They sort of put so much emphasis on being organized that it limits the opportunities going forward. And if they have to play a game on the road in the playoffs, they're going to have to be better at that. If they're not, then they're going to be stuck in these 0-0, these 1-0 matches where a penalty separates it in Philly, and then their season's done, right? For all the good things we're talking about going forward, they have to do that on the road. And if they don't do it, that could be their Achilles heel. You asked the question, Weeby did a couple of speakers ago, what will be their undoing? That will be Nashville's undoing if they have to go on the road. If they're too worried about being too organized defensively and they concede and then having to switch and go more expansive going forward, I think they need to take a few more chances going forward on the road, open themselves up a slightly bit more. And that will be the reason they can go on the road if they have to in the hopefully later rounds of the playoffs. And that's how they get a result.
How do you think Nashville want to get this thing? Who do they want in round one? They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be there. We know that. They are, I believe, going to have a home game. I think that's unless Atlanta
they're guaranteed
unless Atlanta win out
right.
get wins, they will have a home game. Who would they want?
Yeah, there'd have to be some crazy scenario. And Doyle, I realize I didn't answer your last question about the last match against the Red Bulls. I think if they don't, as long as they don't lose, they get a couple of goals, confidence going wise. If they don't lose, they go unbeaten at home throughout the season. And I believe they're only the seventh team to be able to do that in league history. So that would be quite an accomplishment of itself. Every team wants to make their home field advantage. It's not even their home. Their home's being built. It'll be done next year. So I think that'll be quite an accomplishment itself. Who do they want in the playoffs? The teams they've struggled with the most, and it's funny because that they are playing this team this weekend. They really struggle with teams that play that diamond midfield in a really narrow midfield, and they overload the midfield. They struggled against Red Bulls at Red Bull Arena earlier in the year. They struggled against Philadelphia. It was definitely more the 4-3-2-1, but the wingers like to tuck in with Philadelphia. And when they overload the midfield, that's when they struggle the most. They made a little tactical shift against Orlando to throw another number in there. So Urso, Mendez, and Pereira couldn't overrun the midfield. So I don't think they particularly do well against teams that overcrowd the middle. I think they would do better against Atlanta because Atlanta leaves themselves open in the back. New York City does the same thing as well. NYCFC. It's really those teams. DC United, that would be a difficult one as well. In Columbus, would be. It's interesting. They're probably not going to get those two teams that I was just saying moments ago. But I would say they would probably do better against New York City or Atlanta, who are more expansive. And the teams they probably struggle with the most are the ones that overload the midfield, a la New York Red Bulls, Orlando, and.
All right, there you have it. Nashville trying to figure out how it's going to end up on decision day. They'll be on national TV, ESPN. Check that one out. We'll have the second screen live watch along going on as that game is played at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Decision day, as I said. Jamie, appreciate you, man. Thanks for rolling through.
Thanks, fellas.
All right,
appreciate
let's
it
keep
as
it
always.
going. Marcelo Balboa is up for the Colorado Rapids at number 4. Marcelo, congratulations to the Rapids. They have tied a club record with 58 points. They're sitting one back of Seattle, who drew last night on Monday night. This has been a great season for the Rapids, and we are still yet to see sort of the ultimate question we've asked you basically every single week is, can they get it done when it matters in the playoffs without basically DP contributions, which they just are last in the league on this year, which is not a negative because they have 58 points, but just a fact of life.
First, hey guys, how are you?
What's up?
Listen, I think that we're realists here. We know that we haven't been playing great soccer, but we're getting results. So that's huge for a team like this. No, we don't have DPs, but we do have DPs because with everything that's going on, Acosta, you bring in a Mark Anthony Kay, you bring in a Anomaly. Those are DP players. So Porik's done a good job of being able to balance out that budget, bringing in a Yarbrough, bringing in a Barrios. So it's been puzzled together over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's finally in a position where it's competitive. It's challenging for the number 1 spot in the West, and yes, there will be competitors for the MLS Cup.
Marcelo,
come on, Matt, come on.
Yeah, let me figure out how I want to phrase this. We know what the strength of the Rapids is, I think, culturally and as a club, and that is, the squad now is like 25 deep. Robin Fraser has been able to mix and match pieces and players and keep everybody involved, and at the same time getting better performances out of young players and getting more well-rounded performances out of veterans. But on the field, on the day of the game, what is the Rapids' strength? Like how do you, like, if you were an opposing coach prepping for this game, what would you say? Okay, here's where we're going to go at them. Here's where they're going to come at us.
I cannot answer that to help other teams because they haven't figured it out yet. No, listen.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
Mentality. Let me start with that. The mentality. If the Rapids come out slow and a little bit methodical, passing the ball slowly, allowing the other teams to move their lines so they can't play between their lines, then there's a weakness for Colorado. If they can, and let me explain, if you can get a center back to bite, like Lawless bites. Lawless bites hard. Now, if he pulls out of the middle or Danny pulls out of the middle, there's gaps in between those lines. Do you see what I mean? But Colorado does such a nice job. They run, man. I would have to say, if you match their numbers against probably anybody in the league, they probably physically outrun most teams. But they always have a mental lapse somewhere along that 30 to 50-minute mark. And can they get past that? Can they weather the storm? They haven't played great. Let's be honest. They haven't played great over the last month, but they're finding a way to get results. So that's always a sign of a good character of a team.
Marcelo, who is the guy that doesn't get talked about enough in this puzzle? Jack Price has started to get a little bit of his due, but I would argue in some other years he might be a best 11 candidate.
Yeah. It's difficult because, again, we don't have that star. We don't have that guy we rely on to score.
You just told me you guys had like 4 DPs, man. That was supposed to be a
but they're not.
compliment to
But hold on,
Porig.
I did the star. Star is a Reynoso.
I know.
Star is those kind of players. We have hard-working players. To me, I'll be honest with you, the guy who's underrated that doesn't get his dues because he doesn't score a lot of goals is Acosta. Acosta, if you watch him play, the ground he covers, the ability he has to slap a ball with his left and his right, 30, 40 yards on a dime, the work rate he has, the Jack Price. So I think there's quite a few guys that don't get the dues they deserve. But again, this is a team, listen, they'll fight till the end. They'll fight to the end. They're not going to play pretty sometimes, but they'll fight. They've got young guys. When you put Bassett out there, I think Bassett must cover probably 10 miles a game when he's out there. So, again, to say they have a star, maybe Yarbrough. Yarbrough's come up with huge saves this year. That's the guy that you look at that I would think would be up for maybe goalkeeper of the year.
This last game against LAFC on decision day, it feels a little bit to me because the Rapids can't really move a ton. They're going to have a home game like a dress rehearsal. Like LAFC may or may not be in desperation mode. They may be out of it. It might be done for LAFC. Or they might be in a position after tonight against Vancouver where they believe 100% they can get in. What does this final game of the season mean for Robin Fraser?
Listen, first of all, this 2-week break or 3-week break is going to destroy a lot of teams' momentum. It's going to take a little bit of that burst out because it's going to be very difficult to find competitive games. So for Colorado, this weekend is a trial run for the playoffs. Not time to experiment. This will be the last competitive game before you get into the playoff 2 weeks from now on the 20th. So I don't see an experiment going. I think Robin puts his best team out there. You want to go into the playoffs with a good, firm win, a confident win at home, and you keep that little bit of momentum you got going in a 2-week break.
All right, there you have it. That's what's up for the Rapids. They're in. We know they're in. They could set a club record for points against LAFC on decision day. Marcelo, always great to talk, man.
Later, guys.
All right. On to number 3 we go, and it has been the same 3 for most of the year. Seattle Sounders, 1-1 draw last night. Doyle went down early to Chicharito, fought back. Christian Roldan draws the penalty, and it is Panenka by Raul Ruidiaz. And then Jordan Morris on for half an hour, and he looked up for it. He looked up for some physical battles, for some 50-50s, for some collisions, for some hard cuts. What was this game in your mind for Seattle? I mean, look, a draw at home in this situation is probably never going to be something that they're super happy about, but there were a couple positives going forward.
I mean, there were getting Jordan Morris back and having him look like he did. Like he was clearly not 100%, but he didn't look like it was his first game back after an ACL tear either. That is close to the best news you could get ahead of the playoffs, with the best news being that Raul Ruidiaz was back and scored a goal.
And Nico
Ladero was back. He didn't play great, but we've been banging the drum on ETR for a while now. Like, we don't know what they're going to look like. We don't know if they're even going to have them. Well, it turns out they have all 3 of them. And if Seattle have all three of these guys, it is hard for me to pick anybody else in the West. It just is. And I know they're not like the Sounders aren't playing great. They drew at home to a Galaxy team that has not been particularly good recently. Steph Fry had to have a great game. But the thing about the Sounders is that they have guys in goal and defense and midfield and now back in attack who can just win you a match or in Fry's case, win you a point. And that is the essence of who the Sounders have been. And I see no reason to think that they won't start looking more like the team they were back in April and May with the added juice of having a healthy Ladero and a healthy Morris. And that is a scary proposition for the West, even though I think, every Sounders fan will tell you that the month of October and now into November has been kind of disappointing on the field.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, you're about to get a treat. Down 1-0 in a game at home. Oh, the Panenka from Raul in a weekend in which we also got the game-winning Panenka from Emmanuel Reynoso. It's just an amazing weekend for that. Let me ask you this, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, especially during the game last night as I saw these guys come back. And we've talked so much, and you heard Marcelo talk about that break that will kill momentum. I think the Sounders are one of the teams that are looking at that break saying, that's good for us.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually really good for us, not just in a health sense, but in an experience sense as it all comes together.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Getting more reps in training with the full team, getting more rest for the three attackers that we mentioned who have been injured for a while. That's I mean, the break, if you're a well-coached team, then the break can be an asset. And I know that even the best coaches don't really, can struggle coming off of it with their team coming off of an international break. But man, that's the job. That's the job, is to have your team prepared after these breaks. And it's not a mystery. It's not a surprise. And it's not new. There are the international breaks throughout the year. There's an international break before the start of the playoffs almost every single year. And this is just how it's done. So to me, it feels like an excuse if teams cite that. And I think that the Sounders, to their credit, have not in the past and probably will not this year.
We have somebody in my, you're going to groan here. Somebody in my Twitter DMs named Peter who says, check out Raul Ruidiaz's Instagram. He's worried about his hamstring. I went and watched a million stories because Raul Ruidiaz is into Instagram stories. I don't know if he's worried about his hamstring, but he did look a little bit. I mean, it seemed like he was on a pitch count, so to speak, of 60 minutes last night. He did look a little bit disappointed to come off. And just, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into the swagger. I got to get out of my head. This is some Bobby Warshaw stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Seattle Sounders at 3. They drew
wait a minute.
on Wednesday night.
I want to ask you. With these guys healthy, are the Sounders the clear best team in the West?
I think it would be just a little bit hasty to make that proclamation.
Yeah. Where's the weakness?
The weakness, I think, is that Nico Ladero wouldn't be Nico Ladero, and that Raul Ruidiaz might not be Raul Ruidiaz, and that Jordan Morris, it might be a throw your body around sub, but not the sort of imminently goal dangerous and in the sort of post ACL period that we had last time, increasingly good goal creator for Raul Ruidiaz. We just don't know. We don't know. And the last month may be what they are without those guys at top level. I don't know. Whereas I look at Sporting Kansas City and I think I could see them playing through the month at a high level. They're another team that I think really benefit from the break. Well-coached, veteran, injuries to recover from.
But isn't it the same thing? We don't know that Daniel Shala, even though he played this weekend, we don't know that he's going to be the guy he was up until this injury. And we don't know that Alan Pulido is ever coming back and looking like himself, right?
Yeah, so then put him on even playing field for me. Because on potential, outside of maybe the Timbers and Minnesota, just on, hey, how good can they play on a given night? Mm-hmm. They're the top two teams, but they're a better bet than the Timbers or the Loons are to actually play that way with or without their best players. So to me, it's they're on the same level, and that's why I don't know who do you think would want to buy more? How about that? I mean, it's good for both. Who's it more important for?
Oh man, I
Just
don't
roll the
know.
Sporting Kansas City footage right now on YouTube, Rich. We're talking Kansas City. They're at number 2
Yeah.
in this, so it all goes together.
I think probably Sporting Kansas City because Polito hasn't played yet, right? And you want to have him get as much rest as is possible, and get that. It's his knee, right? Get his knee all set.
I think it was it his knee. Yeah, I think it was. I think it was a cleanup on his knee, but now I'm forgetting.
Yeah.
There's been so many injuries in the epic of Alan Polito in Kansas City that it's truly hard to keep track.
It's tough, and so I think the bye is probably more important for Sporting Kansas City because with Seattle, they have those guys back, and it's almost more about match sharpness and match fitness than it is about rest. I think either team would happily take the bye, but for Seattle, I think there's a clearer way of looking at it where it's like actually getting the extra game isn't a bad thing. Whereas with Sporting, given Polito's injury and the time it's taken him to get back, the extra week might be the best thing. And on top of that, the bye coming off of the international date because Shalloy is probably going to be gone with Hungary. So getting him a couple extra days rest before you throw him into a playoff situation, that could end up being pretty valuable.
I also think that Kansas City needs more home field advantage in the playoffs than do the Sounders.
Yeah, I mean, the Sounders have not been great at home. They've actually been better on the road, whereas with Sporting KC, it's kind of reversed. I'm going to take a look now and look at the numbers.
It's 9-2-5 at home for Sporting and 8-6-2 away. So
look, I mean, still very good.
You're at the top of the conference. Yeah, you're not bad, but I just think that, like the form of Johnny Russell, it seems like Kansas City from an attacking perspective is just a lot more effective at home, where other teams are going to say, okay, you carry the game. And Kansas City says, oh, hell yeah, that's what we want to do. Like, we have the best passers in the league. We would like to carry this game and have the majority of possession and both defend and attack in that way. We had somebody get in my mentions about Graham Zusi's season, and I wonder what you think about that. Because when you look at Zusi's season, just from a strictly like stats, compare him to other fullbacks in the league perspective, he is, as you would expect, among the very best passers, and his defensive numbers are actually above average as well, apart from pressures, which, again, going back to Sporting Kansas City style of play, makes sense. You're not asking these guys to go out and be a high-pressing team anymore. What have you made of Graham Zusi's season for Kansas City? I know that's a random question, just popped in my head.
Yeah, I mean, he has had yet another really, really good season, and it's the type of season where if Sporting can play the type of game that they want to play, which, to be clear, they are still a high-pressing team. It's just not as demolition derby as like the Red Bulls or DC United. But they use pressing to just win the ball back and then maintain possession. And Graham Zusi is still good at the pressing part, and he's still great at the maintaining possession part. He's been a really smart attacking fullback for a long time, and his best asset as an attacker is not getting to the end line and whipping in crosses. His best asset as an attacker is pushing up and becoming a possession hub, like almost another central midfielder.
I also don't know if anybody hits a better diagonal ball than he does.
Yeah, I mean,
and when they had him and Zusi, it was just him and Beasler together, it was absurd what they could do on both sides of the field, left and right footed. But like that big diagonal to Shallowy is just bread and butter for Kansas.
They basically killed the Whitecaps with it a month ago, and it's still like he has a claim to be the best right back in MLS history. And he has had another season sort of putting in that work and showing as much. And I'm sure he would like to end it with a nice long playoff run and maybe another trophy. They have they are legit contenders to do that.
They could get a CCL spot as well as we get into the final week here. I believe they have RSL on decision day. Yep. They host RSL on decision day. And whoever finishes atop the West will get a CONCACAF Champions League spot for 2022. Right now, Seattle in pole position, but Kansas City have 2 games left. They finish on decision day, and I'm spacing on midweek. But we just got to get this thing wrapped up here in our final go-round. Let's just hit number 1, Doyle, and call it a day. It's the Revs. They don't move. They have 73 points. They may have 76 when it's all said and done. I mean, what is there left to say about this team, to be honest?
How confident are you in the Revs going into the playoffs and continuing to be the clear best team in the league?
Very confident.
Yeah, based on what?
Extremely confident. Based on that, I think when it comes down to a 1-game scenario, most teams don't have 4 guys that can individually beat them. And the Revs have those guys, and they seem to be playing together in a way that it is very difficult to get that number of like high-end attacking pieces together and complementary. And then as you're seeing on YouTube, you have Matt Turner to be an eraser because, yes, the back line does give up some opportunities. But they have just all year played on tight margins, and playing on tight margins prepares you pretty well for 90 minutes or go-home soccer. And I look at the Eastern Conference, and I just don't see any teams really other than New York City, maybe Atlanta at full stretch, maybe Nashville and Mukhtar is really rolling, that have the combination of, or the balance, I should say, and then the top-end talent to challenge the Revs. I don't know. They have the coach that's the most successful in these times of year. They have players that have proven it all year long and are healthy and on form. They don't seem to have any noticeable holes other than that they play with tight margins, and I'm not sure that's actually a huge negative in the playoffs.
I suspect you're right, but the teams in the past, even Bruce's teams in the past, that A, played with tight margins and then B, succeeded in the playoffs, were more defensive teams. I'm thinking of that 2011 Galaxy side, right?
That's the team. When you said that, that's the team that jumped into my head.
They had 1,000,000 1-0 wins. They were the best defensive team in the league. They obviously had match winners in attack. They had Landon and Beckham. At the end of the season, they had Robbie Keane as well. That's pretty nice. Though Mike McGee was actually, I think they're probably their best player in the playoffs that year. But they were not an open attacking team. They were a very lock it down, control midfield, control where the game is played, don't give up chances type of team. And that is the opposite of what the Revs are. The Revs, even though they have so much talent and they're so fun to watch and they're so well drilled, and they are very organized, they give up a ton of chances, man. They that does kind of worry me. And it worries me in the sense that when they played Columbus last year in the playoffs, the Crew entirely controlled that game. I mean, the Crew just ran the show, and the Revs did not have an answer for that. And suddenly the tight margins in midfield led to kind of a landslide in the attack. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm looking at the East, and I'm going to ask you who could do that the way that the Crew did last year with Nagbe and Zelarayan and
NYCFC.
NYCFC, yeah. I mean, that's to me, they're the most like high-end dangerous threat. Philly's the more, and Nashville are the more consistent, you know what you're going to get threats.
Yeah.
That's just my point of view.
Yep.
Anyway, the number 1 team at the end of these power rankings is the New England Revolution. They set a record for points. They're going to be the top seed in the overall playoffs, home field advantage for as long as they are alive. They're going to have an opportunity to stretch this points record all the way to 76 on decision day, Sunday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Conference, then Western Conference. You can watch starting on ESPN, then over on FS1. We'll have the second screen watch-along show going the entire time on the MLS YouTube, on Facebook, MLSsoccer.com, and the MLS app. Watching the games, giving you goal updates, giving you standing updates as they happen. We'll have some special guests as well, so come tune in and make that your second screen. Watch your team, then hang out with us. That's it for these power rankings on Twitter Spaces. It's been a fun year. Twitter Spaces don't stop, though, because U.S. men's national team is coming up as well. We know the pregame goes on Doyle's for those as well. So check that out. We're done here, folks. Enjoy your Tuesday. Enjoy the game tonight. The game's tomorrow night. The game's on Sunday. And then the playoffs. Adios.